Hey everybody, my name is Jason Candle and I am the VP of Operations here at Global. I get the privilege of working through the budget worksheet with you all. Now, this is an important part of the process of preparing for the field, but also in presenting your ministry to potential support partners. So, we're going to start by opening the budget worksheet document. This is, as it says, your budget worksheet. This is where you will determine the amounts that you need to raise for your monthly support. It includes your salary, your housing, as well as ministry and administrative expenses. You will notice below that we have several tabs/worksheets in this document. This is set up for married couples because you are both considered employees and therefore both need to have salaries associated with your employment. So, for married couples, you need to fill out the salary section on both the Employee 1 and the Employee 2 worksheets. If you're a single person, just fill out the fields on the Employee 1 tab. It is not necessary to split the ministry expenses between the two budgets, but some of our people prefer to do that. Regardless, the sums are calculated for each spouse on the combined total tab to help you determine the overall amounts you will need to raise funds for. The only thing to keep in mind about this is that we require all full-time employees to maintain a minimum of $15,000 a year annual salary. Now that's a gross annual salary before taxes are taken out. This is based on the Mississippi minimum wage and federal law. We also require that our full-time employees carry insurance as well, so that will be something that we'll talk about in just a minute. So let's move on to the instructions. You will see the color code listed on the top right of the sheet. The green cells are fillable, so you can add content to those. The gray cells are locked and have formulas that auto-populate throughout the spreadsheet, so you don't need to add any content to those. If you see a cell with a mark in the top corner that has a note attached, hover over it, you can see the note. The orange cell is in the grand total of the net pay you will see in your bank account each month. Now, let's go over a couple important fields that you're going to see in this, sections of these worksheets. The first is the taxable income or salary line. I want to give a brief explanation of each of these lines, but let me just put a general disclaimer about this section of the worksheet. You won't necessarily be putting a value on every one of these lines. It's just intended to give you a framework to think through all of the various expenses you will or might have. So consider it to be just that. It is a worksheet for you to be able to use in a planning document for your budget. All right, so let's look at these individual expense lines. Housing, rent, fairly self-explanatory, what you're typically going to be paying in rent. Utilities, it's the money that you need to pay your electric, gas, or other bills associated with your home. Food, of course, your groceries, eating out, snacks, things that you're using money to purchase food for. Recreation is money for entertainment, music, subscriptions, movies, concerts, or other things that you might enjoy doing. Personal items includes clothing, toiletries, other kinds of consumable items. Phone, now this one is a little tricky, but bear with me here. We consider your cell phone to be used for both personal and ministry purposes. As a result, you are allowed to count, or you should count, 30% of your cell phone bill as a personal expense. The other 70% will be included in your ministry expense section. We'll get to that in a minute. The internet is the same as the above. It's a 30-70 split. Fuel, transportation. I'm going to save this for later and go into a little bit more detail about some of the confusing things about vehicles and transportation. But suffice it to say, this line is for money that you need to pay for personal transportation expenses, and that should be accounted in this section. Miscellaneous spending is a little bit of a catch-all for things that you're spending money on that might not be something everyone does. Think kids' activities like music lessons, private school expenses. You have extra things for clubs and sports that you're involved with. It's that kind of stuff. Also, potentially furniture replacement, things like that. Vacation is the amount you want to raise to cover vacation expenses each year. Tithe, a reasonable amount that you plan to give back to your local church or other kingdom works. State tax. This is something that you will need to talk to your personal tax advisor about. That will be dependent on lots of factors that we can't really generally discuss here. Additional savings is the amount that you want to set aside each month for general and emergency savings. Think replacing appliances, saving for college, university. This also includes medical savings, money that you're saving to cover extra medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance. Now, sometimes that's going to depend on whether you're in the US or whether you're overseas. Our HR director will go over more of this information of exactly what that's supposed to be. And that's part of the hiring process that happens after you get appointed as a missionary. He will go over all of those insurance and the amounts based on you and your family status. So those numbers will get communicated to you at a later point. Mental health services. Mental health payments are not considered reimbursable expenses. Counseling and other mental health expenses need to be budgeted out of salary due to U.S. tax law. Our insurance does provide coverage for mental health services if you go through their system. If you don't, then you need to budget for it separately. Optional, this is for new categories that don't match the standard ones above. You might put something like house helper in this field. The balance, or discretionary, is to add income so that your net income can be adjusted to cover what you need it to cover. So if the gross isn't coming up to what you want it to be, or rather the net isn't coming up to what you want it to be, this is where you can add money so that the gross will adjust, and as the taxes get taken out, the net income that you need to take care of your family and take care of yourself will be adequate. That's what that line is for. The next section that you're going to see, this payroll deductions, is auto-populated by the amounts that you put in above. This is what we need to take out to cover federal taxes and retirement. Your retirement percentage contribution, however, needs to be added in the cell on the right. This will vary depending on your status with us and your U.S. state of residence. Now, let's talk about the ministry and administrative costs and expenses that you'll have. Some of these lines are also auto-populated based on the information above. The employer FICA and retirement are auto-populated, so don't worry about putting things in there. That's just money that is being counted for in taxes and in retirement that you aren't paying taxes on because it's the employer paid part of the tax and retirement benefits. Donor Elf is a third-party service that we require all new missionaries to have. It is software, it's cloud-based software that we will discuss in another module. It is designed to help you maintain relationships with your donors and contact them and continue to have the relationships that you need to have as you work with that donor base. Work-related travel are flights and other international travel for ministry purposes. Fuel and gasoline. All right, well, let me talk here just for a minute. Fuel and gasoline. Mission-owned vehicle fuel and maintenance. So let me talk just a little bit more about this, the difference between a personal-owned vehicle and a mission-owned vehicle. When you raise money to purchase a vehicle on the field, even though it might technically be owned and registered under your name, that vehicle is really owned by Global Outreach because you used non-taxable support money to purchase it. Because of that, all of the fuel and maintenance for that vehicle are reimbursable expenses. But the counter to that reality is that you need to track all personal mileage that you use on that vehicle and report that on your year-end taxes. The point is, your vehicle is a ministry vehicle and all of its expenses are reimbursable, but when you use it for personal benefit, you need to keep track of that usage. This is not the same for vehicles that you use in the U.S. It's exactly the opposite. You pay for all of the fuel and maintenance, and you track your ministry mileage to count as a deduction on your year-end taxes. Don't worry, we'll talk more about this in person, but that's a general overview of it for now. In-country travel. These expenses include travel expenses that you incur for ministry purposes in your host country, bus, taxi, etc. Telephone, internet, this is the 70% remainder from the amount above. Work staff. A lot of our missionaries have people that work as employees for the ministry. You can budget for those expenses here. Charity, development. This is money that you're raising for ministry work in this category. Maintenance and repairs. Expenses on ministry vehicles or other ministry-owned property items that incur maintenance costs. Building rent, if you have rentals for your ministry for which you need to budget money. Office supplies, things like printer ink and paper that are consumable and regular expenses. Small projects. Do you have regular projects you're expecting to have, or are you expecting to have short-term teams coming? Those are places that you can plan for the costs that will be in your ministry associated with those things. Fundraising are costs associated with creating and sending newsletters and other fundraising costs that you might have. Work permit. Some of your host countries will require you to get work permits and regular visas. Language. Costs associated with language school or tutors are reimbursable ministry expenses. Visa expenses. These are trips associated with visa costs as well as government fees you might need to pay. Continuing education. This is for ministry-related expenses incurred for things like graduate programs or other continuing education requirements based on your profession. Company life insurance. The director of HR will give you this information, as well as the company health insurance, given to you by our director of HR upon completion of the hiring process. Company retreats. We encourage you to take advantage of coming to one of our regional retreats. You can budget money monthly to cover the expenses of attending one of these retreats. Sort of treat it like a savings account for those things. Kids' education. For your school-age children, while working outside of the U.S., we allow you to get reimbursed for your education expenses. Debrief costs. We strongly encourage our missionaries to participate in some sort of formal debrief when coming off of the field for furloughs or permanently. We recommend budgeting money now in order to have those funds available in which to participate in. Emergency salary. This is money set aside to help you prepare for sudden, out-of-pocket emergency salary needs. You can request emergency salary up to $2,500 without having to redo your budget. If it goes more than that in any given year, then we require you to submit an amendment to your budget. Optional. Any other ministry-specific costs that you might have. So that's it for that part of the worksheet, but we're not quite done yet. If you look at the bottom of the spreadsheet, you'll see a few other tabs called Combined Totaled, Fully Funded for Launch, and Summary. The Combined Total tab is there to help you see the total support amount from both the employee tabs. The last section on it deals with some of the one-time costs associated with launch or major projects of ministry. This is money that you need to raise for travel to the field, outfitting your home, and other large purchases that you might need in order to get started in the ministry in your host country. It is also a place to plan for large ministry projects that might require one-time expenses. On this tab, you will also see the church partnership total that will be withdrawn from your account, each month as part of the church partnership agreement. Let's talk a little bit about the Fully Funded for Launch tab. You'll see a couple of fields that we require in order to give you approval for launch. One is that we require a 3-month support reserve to be in your account before you launch for the field. This is intended to be a forced savings account if something were to happen while on the field and your donors stopped suddenly giving. Most of the fields on this sheet are automatically generated, but we wanted to point out that you can keep track of where you are by periodically updating your current support raised amounts. We'll get more into that when we talk about Donor Elf and the way that that will help you know where you're at in your support raising process. The last tab is a summary that is for home office purposes only. You shouldn't need to put anything on there. So, those are the basics of working on budgets to prepare for the field. After you are completed with your research into these items, you can submit the completed budget form to me for approval. This is one of the most important steps as you prepare to launch to the field. Hopefully, this tutorial will help you think through and finalize your support requirements to get to the field. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. You can reach out to me, Jason Candle, at my email address, which is the letter J, Kandel, at globaloutreach.org. Please know that we are thrilled that you are part of Global Outreach, and we are continuing to pray for you through this journey. Thanks a lot.